Hello and welcome to Dave's Off-Grid, On-Grid Adventures. And in this episode, we're going to be trying to take this small NVR network video recorder and converting it over to run off of a 24-volt solar power battery system. This NVR is small, so it's a good candidate for trying to run it off of the battery system. The DC port on the back of it is 12 volts 5 amps, and so that can be converted from our 24-volt battery system. And this particular model is several years old. I've had it for a number of years, and it's got a very low power processor in it. Really not a lot to it. It's a 2-bay NVR, which is very similar to a NAS device or a network attached storage. But basically, the purpose of this is to record video from IP cameras or security cameras around the house. But the issue with this is it stopped working. And I believe it's the hard drive. So first we need to take this hard drive out and we're going to swap it out with a SSD. So let's go ahead and do that. And this just had an old mechanical 500 gigabyte hard drive, so I'm fairly certain this was the reason why it failed due to the malfunction of the hard drive. So just doing a quick swap, we're going to slap in this 500 gigabyte SSD, and we'll test it out to see if it's going to power on. I'm not going to go through and actually attach this down for now, just kind of plug it in, and we're going to try to boot it up. The hard drive swap was successful on this NVR. Once I swapped it out, everything booted up fine, was able to record video as expected. Now I wasn't paying attention when I put in the SSD and actually put in a 2 terabyte SSD in there. So I swapped that out again for the 500 gigabyte SSD. That's really only the space that I'm going to need for this particular application. With 500 gigabytes, recording 4 cameras that only record when motion is detected, you can easily get 7, 14 or more days of recordings on 500 gigabytes of storage. So let's take a look at everything that we have here in order to move on to the next step in this project. In order to power our NVR device, we're going to need a few things. The solar power battery system is 24 volts. So we need to step that down to 12 volts in order to be able to safely run this device, because this input on here is 12 volts. So to do that, we have a DC to DC converter. This DC to DC converter will take in the 24 volts from the battery, and then it will output 12 volts. And in this particular model, it's 12 volts 5 amps. So that's 60 watts of available power. But this NVR device is only pulling 6 to 8 watts when running. And that's with 4 cameras recording and everything. So that's really fantastic when it comes to energy consumption. So this converter will have no issues powering the device. And the concern that I initially had with this was, you have to be careful when it comes to any type of DC to DC converter, or really any type of energy converter, is it will generate heat. And you need to do something with that heat or it could overheat. So the issue could have been that I was going to need to put a fan on this or mount this so that there was air circulating out of it, maybe mount it here on the inside so the fan would keep it cool. However, with this only pulling 6 to 8 watts, this DC to DC converter doesn't even get warm. Or if it does, it's barely noticeable. So heat dissipation is not going to be an issue. So once we run from our input, from our battery system, and our voltage coming out is 12 volts, we need to be able to attach it to or connect it to our NVR device. All right, and we do that with one of these barrel adapters. And it's pretty straightforward. You connect your positive and negative wires and then you plug it in. However, this adapter is 2.1 millimeter, and that's not the right size to fit the back of this NVR. And I wasn't able to find a adapter like this in the right size. So we're just basically going to convert it. And another adapter So this is a 2.1 millimeter adapter to a 2.5. So it's going to plug into here, and then we'll just plug it right into the back of our device. And so it sticks out a little bit, looks a little janky, but this is going to be on the back side of the device anyways, so no one's really going to be able to see it, so it's not too big of an issue. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do with this converter. I don't want to just have it sitting on the outside of the unit. If possible, I want to try to put it inside the NVR. And this NVR is practically hollow on the inside. There's really not much to it. You've got your circuit board, you've got your hard drive, you got a fan. So there's plenty of room on the inside to easily mount this inside the case itself. And again, because heat dissipation is not an issue with this, then I don't have to worry about it overheating inside the case. Now, one place that we can mount this is up here at the top. And if I was concerned about heat, or if it did get a little bit warm, you'd have cross ventilation from your fan. The issue with putting it up here is that my wires are not long enough. So I could put it up here, but I would need to attach longer wires to it. So instead, placing it down here towards the bottom will give me more room for my wires to run them out and then to connect into our adapter and power the device. So the best spot looks like it's going to be somewhere down here at the bottom. Now on the back side of this case, you could drill some holes in here to run your wires out of. But if you look down here, and you'll see this on a lot of different electronic devices, this is for a Kensington lock. And if you want to physically lock your device down to a desk or a rack or something like that and secure it, you would use a Kensington lock. Now I'm not going to use a Kensington lock for this device, but I've already got a little bit of an opening to run some wires out of here, so this can be utilized for that. Now the issue is, this is not quite wide enough to run 4 wires, but you can fit 3 in there. Over here to the left, we have a screw hole that is used for attaching and securing the other side of the case. The way that this case snaps in on this NVR, you really don't need to secure it down with a screw. And if you are, you can get away with putting a screw in up here at the very top if you really wanted to do that. So actually what I'll do is I'll run 3 wires through where you put a Kensington lock, and then run the 4th wire out at this screw hole right here. Now the case itself also has those same holes, so for your Kensington lock and then for the screw. So because of that, rather than mounting it here on this part of the case, I'm actually just going to go ahead and mount it on the inside of the plastic shell case. So putting it somewhere right along in here with some double-sided tape, run my wires out, and we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and get this attached in here, run our wires out, and see if we can get this case back together. Apply our double-sided tape. Next, we'll need to feed those wires through the metal portion of the case as well. And this is a completely optional step. You don't have to run it like this or mount it on the inside. You could just have it on the outside if that's what you wanted to do, but just want to make it look a little bit cleaner. But what we have here is our input, positive and negative, and then we have our output. And we need the wires for the output to be long enough so that when we have our barrel plug adapter, you've got to be able to go and plug in to here. So it was important that these are long enough. With these, we're going to be attaching this to our DC fuse block, so I'll have to attach wires to this anyways, so we were not so worried about that. But definitely our output, positive and negative, needed to be long enough to fit. And because we're having to use this adapter, we needed just a little bit extra room. Let's go ahead and attach our positive and negative to our barrel plug. Make sure that you pay attention to your positive and negative. You don't want to reverse the polarity on here. So for this one, we've got our negative on this side. And our positive. And we can attach our adapter and plug in. There we go. Now all we need to do is connect this to our DC fuse block. The connections to our battery, we're going to use Wago connectors. And this is just going to be temporary. And the reason for that is, for the testing phase of this, I'm going to have it hooked up right next to where the DC fuse block is in a solar power battery system. But eventually I want to put this back to where I originally had it, which was in the communication closet of the office. In order to do that, I'm going to need to run some low voltage line from the garage to the office in an upcoming video. But in order to test this to make sure that it functions properly as expected, we're going to be hooking this directly up to the DC fuse block right there at our battery system. So we'll do that with temporary connections using our Wago connectors. For our positive side, put your wire in and clamp it down. Makes a nice secure connection. We'll do the same for our negative. And we'll run one additional wire each going to our DC fuse block. Let's make our connections to the DC fuse block. Negative connection up here at the negative bus bar, positive connection here, and we're going to fuse it with a 5-amp fuse. And next, all we need to do is connect our positive and negative to our Wago connections. Do negative first. And plug in our device. Make our Ethernet connection so we can receive data from our cameras. We've already got an indicator light on for Ethernet, so now we need to just power this device on. And we have power. Once everything goes through the boot up process, we'll go back and make sure that we have connections to our cameras. And that will wrap up this project. In conclusion, this type of setup is feasible and could apply to a cabin or remote location that is off-grid. Rather than having to power the NVR through a standard AC outlet, a connection to a solar power battery system is possible. The benefits eliminate any AC to DC conversion loss. which in this setup is not significant, but still equates to approximately 2 watts. It's not much, but 2 watts per hour, or 48 watt hours in a day, for an entire year is 17 kilowatt hours of power. This NVR only consumes between 6 to 8 watts of power. A low power device is beneficial in this setup. And it gives you the flexibility to run the NVR from the batteries, and if you needed to, you can still plug in the AC adapter and power the device as normal. Having the NVR connected directly to your solar power battery system means if your inverter fails, the NVR will still run as long as your charge controller is charging the batteries. And that wraps up this video. We will see you next time on Dave's Off-Grid, On-Grid Adventures.